Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to this lunchtime webinar that's been organised by the Institution of Mechanical Engineers Pressure Systems Group Board. My name's Paul Smith. I'm the chair of the Institution of Mechanical Engineers PSG, Pressure Systems Group, and it gives me great pleasure to present this webinar to you today. The webinar, is entitled The Life Cycle of Pressure Systems. And we're going to talk you through some aspects of the life cycle of pressure systems and what we mean by that. And then we're also going to introduce an upcoming conference that we've organised on the topic of the life cycle of pressure systems. So we've broken down the webinar into this agenda. So first up, we'll have a welcome from myself and the presenting team. We'll then have an introduction to the IMechE Pressure Systems Group and the board and some activities and what we do and what our objectives are. We'll then introduce the notion of the life cycle of pressure systems and what we mean by that and why it's important. Following this, we'll have two technical talks. First up from Simon Emeny on updates on codes and standards and some regulatory updates. And secondly, from Charles Byrne, who will give a technical talk on some issues facing the pressure vessel manufacturers community, and also some snippets of what to expect from our upcoming conference. I'll then move to give some more details about the conference itself and what you can expect to get from it and how you can get involved. And finally, at the end, we'll have a questions and answers session. So what I would ask you to do is please send in your questions via the portal in the chat, and they all come into to the presenting team, and then we can read them out and have them answered at the end. So please don't wait to the very end. You can ask your questions at any time, and we'll gather those up for answering. So, by way of a welcome, so here's the presenting team for today. So my name's Paul Smith. I work for Jacobs, and I'm the chair of the Pressure Systems Group at the IMechE. I've been the chair since 2015, and it's a great privilege, and it's something I really enjoy doing. And alongside me are the two vice chairs of the PSG. So Simon Emeny works for LRQA, the inspection body, and he's going to give a talk later on about some regulatory updates. And we've got Charles Byrne, who works for Graham Hart Process Technology, specialist manufacturer of heat transfer equipment. And it's a real pleasure to have the two vice chairs here along with me today to give this webinar, and really looking forward to their presentations that they're going to give later on. So that's the welcome. We'll move now just to have a few slides about the Pressure Systems Group. So for those of you who are not familiar with the PSG and what we do. So the Pressure Systems Group is one of the groups within the IMechE committee structure. So on the right here, we've got One Birdcage Walk, the HQ. It's a fantastic building. If you get the chance, please go along and have a look. It's steeped in history, and it's got some great resources such as the library and so on. But within the IMechE, there is a committee structure, and we make up one of those groups. So we sit alongside a number of other technical committees. So we are about 25 members of the IMechE, the group board there, and we represent around 10,000 members of the IMechE who've expressed an interest in pressure systems. And what we do, what we aim to do, is to bring the whole pressure systems community together. So as the IMechE, it's incumbent on us to forge those networks and have different industry bodies and organisations and bring them all together to discuss and share the latest updates in what's happening in pressure systems. And that's important because we can influence policy and direction. We are here in the heart of Westminster, and so we've got access to government departments, and we can have policy papers and so on. And so therefore, I believe that PSG is the forum where you want to raise new and emerging issues and topics. We've got a fantastic network within the pressure systems community, and we are the place to share information and get forge those links between the stakeholders. So expanding on those a little bit, so the groups in the IMechE, we were here to serve this community of pressure systems engineers by knowledge transfer. And we do that through a program of seminars and webinars like we're doing today. We've got discussion days on hot topics. So we did one on materials, road materials and uncertified materials. We had lectures, so we've had some fantastic lectures down the years. Stuart Cameron gave the last one. We've got an active LinkedIn group where you can discuss and put questions and suggestions and so on. And then with the Strathclyde Pressure Systems courses, we promote those through our network, and we give out a prize every year for eminent pressure systems engineers. That's the kind of activities of us as an IMechE group. In terms of the pressure systems community, I mentioned various groups we bring together. So academia is represented through Strathclyde mainly. The regulators are there, that's HSE and ONR. Manufacturers, so Charles represents the Pressure Vessel Manufacturers Forum. The inspection body, so Simon's on the board representing LRQA. Owner operators, big organisations such as INEOS are represented on our board. So BSI are there to represent standardisation bodies, and other forums and bodies such as EMUA and SAFED are represented. So we really are this kind of whole melting pot of everyone who's interested in pressure systems. In terms of the policy and direction, in the past we've issued policy papers. We did one on Brexit a few years ago. That was been published on the IMechE page. And industry alerts we did in conjunction with Charles's group, one about pressure test safety. I mentioned the links with the government. We have good, strong links with the Department for Business and Trade and Office of Product Safety now. And in terms of this forum to raise new and emerging topics, we can use events such as conferences and webinars that we've got coming up to showcase new technology and share information about any new code rules. Here's an example of some events that we've done. So this was the last big one we did in the IMechE. So you can see the lecture theatre is pretty packed out. And this was the last time we ran the Lifecycle of Pressure Systems event, and it was hugely popular. And we'd like to see people turning out in similar numbers, or if not better, in October when we run the next edition of the conference. We don't just focus on the life cycle, however. Here's a snippet or sample of the kind of events and seminars we've done. So failures of pressure systems, changes to regulations, structural integrity, late life care, low temperature, pressure testing, connectors and bolted joints, non-invasive inspection technology, life cycle we mentioned, quality and competence, manufacturing or additive manufacturing, pressure testing, and so on. Pressure systems in the digital age, certification, and nuclear pressure systems. And we're coming round to the life cycle of pressure systems again in London in 2023, later on this year. So you'll see that not all of our events are in London. We don't always hold them at IMechE HQ. We have some in Sheffield. We've had them in Manchester, up in Newcastle, and during the COVID we did some online paid for events, as webinars. So if you've got an idea or a suggestion for an event that you'd like to see, or a location, if you want to have an event in your area or your locality, then please let us know by any of the means that I mentioned, LinkedIn, etc., and we can organise that. That's a kind of whirlwind of what the PSG does and some of our activities that we've been up to. So we'll move now to talking about the actual life cycle of pressure systems and what we mean by that. So if we think of all the activities that are undertaken to during the life of a pressure system, you'd start with the design at the top here, select materials or have materials additively made for you. You then do the fabrication operations, welding, NDT, pressure testing, and so on. And then move to installation and commissioning, go through some commissioning testing. And that's kind of bringing the products into service. And then on the left-hand side is the operating domain, where you'd be thinking about in-service inspection and operation, and then life extension, and finally decommissioning. They're like the phases, kind of running around the life cycle of pressure systems. But throughout all those phases, there's some cross-cutting activities that we must think about, at all the time. So we've got applicable regulations, codes and standards, what requirements they specify for each of these different life phases, any quality competence requirements, and things like third-party conformity assessment and inspection are equally important at any phase during the life cycle. So I mean, that's all good and interesting. I'm sure you've seen all this kind of stuff before. So why is it important? Why are we presenting a conference on this? So for us in PSG, this is important because all these different elements are interlinked in the life cycle, and developments are happening very, very fast, rapidly in all areas. So on the left here, just give some examples. We're seeing advancements in design, automation in design and AI and all this good stuff. And then additive manufacturing is coming along at a great pace, coupled with advances in non-destructive testing and welding and codes and standards and so on. All these areas are in development, but if you take a decision at one stage of the life cycle, it may have like a negative impact or a big impact on another stage of the life cycle. So you may have some development, some new technology that you want to use, but in order to be really kind of tied up and thinking holistically, we need to understand about design decisions, for example, how they impact other areas or other phases of the life cycle. So you take a decision at the design stage, or you choose a material that then could impose different criteria for fabrication, things like tolerances and so on, or access for inspection and so on at later stages during the life cycle. So the message we're trying to get across here of why it's so important is we need to take almost a step back and think about, as a pressure systems community, where the new developments are, what topics are the hot topics, but then also where they fit into this overall life cycle of pressure systems, and how decisions and that we take in one area of the life cycle may impact other stakeholders who are operating in different phases of the life cycle. And that's going to be the essence, really, of this conference that we've got coming up in London in October. And I'll give you some more slides on that later to give you some more detail about the conference itself. But what we're going to do now is to give you a kind of taster for the technical talks of what to expect, or what the new developments are in these various areas of the life cycle. So first up is Simon. So we've got a placeholder here for Simon Emeny is going to do a technical talk. So I've actually got his slides. So if I drop these on here and go full screen, then we can go over to Simon. So I'll drive Simon, and I'll invite you now to give your talk on an introduction to life cycle of pressure systems.
That's great. Thank you, Paul, and hello, everybody. So as Paul said, we're looking to do a brief taster session for a couple of the technical areas, and I was volunteered to talk about changes in code standards and regulations. Now, pressure equipment is covered by many codes, standards and regulations, and obviously it depends on where you are in the world. So specifically what I've done for today is to look at a well-used international standard, and then to look at a piece of legislation that is quite important to those of us in the UK, as a result of some changes that have gone about. So Paul, if we can have the first slide, please. So the first thing to talk about is ASME, so the American Society of Mechanical Engineers Boiler and Pressure Vessel Code. That is a document that's very well established, well known, and every 2 years it's subject to update. The updates are published. So in this case, for the ones that are becoming mandatory on January the 1st, 2024, they were published on the 1st of July this year. And obviously there's a fairly comprehensive set of guidance of what the changes are, and those are normally communicated by various inspection bodies. Obviously, I'm going to promote LRQA because that's who I work for. And so this is part of the brief that we've given to our clients on ASME changes. So next one, Paul will show some examples of the changes that have gone about. Now, obviously, we'll talk more in detail in the seminar that we're running in London, but in essence, I've highlighted there two areas that are important for us, whatever type of pressure equipment we're manufacturing. So the first one is around some changes to the theme of welding weld procedures, and you can see there that in the boilers, in the power boilers section, in ASME Section 8 Division 1 for unfired fusion welded pressure vessels, as well as where we'd expect there to be some changes, which is in ASME 9, the welder and welding section. And there's also, as you can see there, been a change to base metal and its relationship as an essential variable. So we've got some changes that are coming up that are quite important for anybody using the ASME code. Now, some people will use the ASME code as it's published. Others will still be using the version that was in place when they signed their contract. And others will be looking at how they're going to use ASME going forwards. And as part of the session that we're putting on in London, there will be the opportunity to go through those different scenarios. Other changes in ASME that are coming up around section 2, which is the materials section, again, widely used, not just for any one particular part of the ASME code. And you can see that there are a significant number of material specifications that have been changed, either small updates or more significant updates. And again, more detail can come, but you'll see that is going to be quite interesting, whether you're into ferrous or non-ferrous materials. We'll have a look at the next one, Paul. So, okay, UKCA marking. Now, UKCA marking is the UK's version of CE marking, or at least it was intended with the UK's product conformity legislation to replace CE marking as a result of the UK's withdrawal from the European Union. We've already had a number of changes, or at least delays, to the original timeline. And then there was an announcement made by the UK government's Department for Business and Trade recently, whereby they have said that they are intending to extend the recognition of CE marking for placing most goods on the market indefinitely. Now, in some ways, that could be seen as a positive announcement. In other ways, it could be seen as a negative announcement. But I think what we can recognize is it's an incomplete announcement. So it talks about an intention. Well, the road to hell is paved with good and sometimes bad intentions. So the first thing to think about is what the intention is going to mean. Is it going to delay things? Is the intention going to go through? Because the situation is still developing and the government must both frame what it's going to do, debate what it's going to do, get agreement, and publish in a timely manner the legislation. Now, okay, they've got a small amount of time to do that. And I say a small amount of time because we all know that a year can be a lifetime, but it can also be no time at all in politics. And the other thing we've got to recognize is that they're only talking about currently 18 of the product conformity regulations that would have originally been covered by CE marking in the UK and are now potentially covered by UKCA marking. So for us as practitioners of pressure systems, that relates predominantly to the simple pressure vessels regulations, the pressure equipment safety regulations, and to a lesser degree, the machinery regulation or safety of machinery regulations. But we've got a few questions, obviously. One is, what does indefinitely mean? There has been talk in the past of technical divergence and the point at which technical divergence would necessitate the suspension of recognition or not. We've also got to understand if that ends CA marking or UKCA marking or not. Now, the government have issued a clarification to their original announcement stating that they don't wish to see that as the end to UKCA marking, but there is obviously an issue around obtaining knowledge about how to do this and how to keep it fresh and relevant and not a second-class system. How do we mark an assembly that's partly CE marked, but it's been assembled in the UK? It's going to be in the UK. It's not going to be traded with the EU. Do we bring an EU conformity assessment body in? Do we have to have an authorized representative in the EU, even though we're not selling it to the EU? How does that work? And has the European Commission signed off on this? And also, a lot of our pressure equipment assemblies have some relationship with the transportable pressure equipment regulations, and they have already moved to the UKCA equivalent, which is something called a row mark, and that has now been in place for a number of months. So lots of questions. Hopefully we can come up with some answers to those and continue to support both UK industry, but also the UK PLC with having a robust and relevant set of regulations, making appropriate recognition of other trading blocks, but not losing sight of the importance of the UK market for both purchasers and manufacturers. And so that is a nice little segue, Paul, I think, to move across back to you and then across to Charles for a discussion about manufacturers.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Simon. That was an excellent presentation. Really kind of gives a flavour of the questions that are being asked. So thank you again. We'll hopefully try and answer some of those questions later on in London. So we'll continue with the presentation and we'll take the audience questions and answers at the end. So the next presentation is from Charles. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come off screen share and hand over to Charles Byrne to give his presentation. So I shall do that now, and over to you, Charles.
Thank you, Paul. Just trying to pick up on my presentation here now, if I can. If you bear with me. Yeah. Ooh, no, sorry. Went so well in practice. Window. Yeah. Okay, so that should be there now for people to see.
Yeah, got that. Thanks.
Right. Okay. No problem. Okay. So Charles Byrne, Technical Director at Graham Harts. We design and manufacture heat transfer, high integrity pressure equipment. We have been doing for 50 years. I also serve as a technical lead on the Pressure Vessel Manufacturers Forum and a chair of the Pressure Equipment Consultation Forum, which is a group of stakeholders from industry who have a vested interest in regulation and legislation in relation to pressure equipment. Just to give you a little bit of background in terms of where we come from, the company where I work as a technical director, we get involved in all sorts of pressure equipment, electric heat exchangers, reactor vessels, some other heat exchangers, some spare bundles, separator vessels, and in some instances we also get involved in some very high pressure and very high temperature shell and tube heat exchangers and vessels upwards of 550 bar and 1200 degrees C. So it gives you a bit of an idea that with 30 years of experience, there's quite a lot that we've been exposed to in terms of mechanical design, codes, legislation, regulations, and changes. So what are the current issues affecting manufacture that would be commonplace to a number of different manufacturers? Obviously, the main topic, as Simon alluded to, would be UKCA marking. Whether this now is freedom for us as manufacturers in the industry to move, or whether it's continued uncertainty. Obviously, that depends on who you're asking and what their view is to their products that they make, how much exporting that they do, or how insular their thoughts are of the UKCA market. But the UKCA marking at the moment is certainly one major area of uncertainty. So it is an issue that's affecting manufacture. Likewise, materials. Most of the materials, 95% of the materials that we make for our pressure vessels and for our heat exchangers come from European suppliers. Without a proper system of recognition in place, at this moment in time, it would prove impossible to bring European materials from European manufacturers straight into the UK, because the legislation as it's written at the moment has us in a position where those suppliers would have to have a quality system which is approved by a competent body established in the UK, and there's not enough commercial interest to generate a desire on the part of the material manufacturers to want to become certified again, not only to a European competent body, but to a UK competent body. It's a lively and ongoing debate. Pressure test safety, all revved up but nowhere to go. We have a situation where, responding to the needs of industry in 2017, we went away and we have devised a system and some guidance with EMUA 158 on pressure test safety. So it's now possible to do e-learning. It's also possible to do some bolted joint courses. The main problem that I have at this moment in time is that if the people do these courses, there's still no means for people to have their competences assessed and certified. So we've rather sort of hit a roadblock on that, and we need to reopen that discussion to find out how do we take our people from being educated and trained into a position where they can actively use their competencies. One of the major things affecting our industry is the ability to retain people in a nuclear and SMR future, where we have a large divergence of previous and loyal employees all moving towards those industries with a greater number and a worrying number. And we need to sort of look at that as manufacturers and discuss how do we actually entice and withhold people to carry on manufacturing in the pressure systems arena. Material origins, as we live in a very competitive marketplace, we do hear continuous stories of material suppliers and distributors who are having to face a difficult choice as to whether they go out of business or whether they start importing materials and then sort of overstamping them or trying to claim that they've come from a different point of origin. So that's an ongoing fight that means we have to be ever vigilant and work with the notified and approved bodies to take care of that. And then we have a situation where some product suppliers are just simply choosing not to locate in the UK. So we have end users that are convinced to use certain products like gaskets, and then we find that those gasket manufacturers don't locate in the UK, they're not located in the UK, and trying to deal with them in Europe is a very, very big problem. The hot topics for 2023, additive manufacturing. How soon is now? How soon are we going to start seeing additive manufactured components actually physically coming up and being used in design? A very hot topic. And now that they have this introduced into some of the codes, as Paul said earlier, some of these things are developing at an incredibly fast rate. Digital twins, when are we going to start seeing the feedback from industry back into the design software and seeing the benefits, so we can start maybe thinking differently about how we design our pressure vessels and our heat exchangers? Net zero, a challenge and an opportunity for our industry, and we wait to see just how much of that is going to actually come into UK manufacture and how we adapt the existing equipment that we've made to actually face those new challenges from CCUS and hydrogen. Interesting topic that's just been brought online, which is the use of ChatGPT for CNC machining and drilling of pressure vessel components. It's a hot topic among manufacturers. And AI, artificial intelligence in pressure equipment design and manufacture, a topic that which I'm hoping to touch on far more when we have our seminar. And then finally, the PECF and the IMechE, as Paul has alluded to, that the IMechE Pressure Systems Group have the ability to influence policy and direction. And we're looking for that to be the case in terms of the UKCA marking and any other topical matter which we think is going to affect the competitiveness of manufacturers in the UK. Final slide, taking a look at some of the other manufacturers who will be some of the other presentations, which nonetheless have got related manufacturing content. Paul Grady and David Glass from the HSE will be looking at regulation now and in the future for manufacturers and operators. They'll be looking at regulation across the full life cycle and wider regulations to reflect ongoing developments for net zero. How will that future knowledge be shared and cascaded? And what will be the HSE strategy to actually enable industry to innovate, but do it in a safe manner? Peter Batty will be talking to us about global conformity assessment and talking about some of the instances and examples that he has where equipment, although designed and manufactured correctly, has not been considered from a global conformity point of view, and then creates problems at the point of installation and use. Alex Zakisharava is basically going to produce a really good presentation on a full life cycle review of how the design phase of a pressure system life cycle can impact. So he's going to be looking at the impact of design decisions in terms of cost of procurement, the ease of fabrication, installation and commissioning, and then the subsequent operation and maintenance. He'll look at examples of poor design or design emissions leading to issues later in the life cycle. Alex will also highlight some good and bad practices in the design phase and how to get rid of them. And what will actually be quite interesting is Alex is then going to consider the reverse of that and go to the end of the product life cycle and during the operational life of the equipment, and consider what happens when the owners and operators deviate away from the design intent, and a focus about the need to capture when changes are made. And that would include an assessment for future modifications or re-rating of the equipment. So it really is a full life cycle review. Alex Berry is going to present a great case study from industry where he works at Phillips 66. It's a situation where they've had some very high pressure and high temperature vessels and exchangers on site that have been causing problems. It's not just the data, but it's actually, he's going to go through the decision making, how they've explored new combinations of bolting and gasket materials. He'll also be sharing with us the challenges that they've faced on site and how they've had to trial and test and sometimes fail. And Alex, there's a step-by-step guidance, and Alex is the sort of guy that gives a really good presentation, warts and all, and he will explain exactly how they have succeeded in that, but share a lot of photographs and a lot of really useful information, especially around the software that they've decided to adopt and use for their leaking flanges at high pressures and high temperatures. David Hardacre will be speaking to us from LRQA about how the codes are now reflecting the very, very fast developments in additive manufacturing and how the timescales will affect us going forward and how soon it will be before we see real-time certification examples and incorporation of components into the UK. And then finally, Nawal Prinja will be speaking from Jacobs. Now, Nawal is going to be speaking about the digital twin systems for digital twins for pressure systems, which I can't wait to hear some feedback on that because it was one of the hot topics that we're looking at. But also, Nawal will be looking at artificial intelligence in the design of pressure systems. So it's almost as if the selection of some of the other speakers is going to actually answer a lot of the hot topics that we have from manufacture. That is the end of my presentation at this moment, and obviously I'll be available for some of the questions and answers afterwards.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much, Charles. That's really useful to get, the updates from the manufacturing community and then the hot topics that are considered by the manufacturers. Again, we hope to answer some of these as we go into our seminar in London later on this year. So that concludes the two technical talks. So what I'll do now is just talk a little bit about the conference that we've got coming up and how you might get involved, or what it's got on offer for you. So it's going to be over 2 days in October in London to explore all the different aspects of the pressure systems life cycle. We consider that this is the premier UK pressure systems event in 2023. So it's one not to miss, because it's the best chance you're going to have to interact with all these industry leaders on the latest developments in pressure systems. We do have, I put here an amazing lineup of speakers, and that is true. We have this incredible speaker lineup that I'll talk you through shortly. There's obviously going to be great networking opportunities. You saw how many people were in the lecture theatre on the previous photo I showed. So there's all those people to meet and make some new contacts. You'll be able to interact with sponsors, and we've got a dinner taking place in the library of the IMechE after day one. So I put a screenshot of the event page there on the IMechE site. So as we go into more of the detail of what's going to be covered, we've got on day one, we're going to be covering the regulatory landscape. We've got case studies of the entire life cycle. We'll then start moving through these different phases that I showed earlier. So design, advances in design, fabrication now for NDT, codes and standards, and welding, additive. And then we'll have this kind of get everyone back at the end of day one to discuss where we're going as a kind of state of the union, what's the future of the pressure systems industry. We'll then switch to day two. We've got manufacturing certification session, in-service inspection, connectors and bolted joints, repairs and life extension, quality, and then the regulator will conclude the day. So what I can say without doubt, so we've got a who's who of speakers from across the pressure systems industry, and at the moment we've got 28 presentations across 2 days. So if we go on the IMechE webpage, so this is the overview here. So in terms of the program, so I'll start the day off. We'll then have David Glass giving a talk from the regulator standpoint. We then got a case study from Phil Jenkinson there. And then Alex's presentation is on design. So Charles has mentioned that and what that's going to contain. Naval will continue the design theme. And then we'll split out into these 2 streams. So you'll have the choice within the IMechE HQ to go to the non-destructive inspection and testing stream that's going to be with NAMRC and Mark Dowell from the NDT Leadership Forum. Or you can go to the Codes and Standards workshop that's going to be facilitated by BSI, and Simon Erland and David Nash will give us an update there. After break, we'll have a welding session hosted by TWI looking at future activities, and then additive manufacturing. So again, this is in parallel. You can choose which one to go to. So David's been mentioned, David Hardacre. He's got a lot of material to cover there on what's new. And then Adrian will look at the emerging code in what's being codified in EN 13445. We'll come back after a break to the plenary that I mentioned, and that's your chance to really, get the latest or put your views across where we should go as a pressure systems community. And Jake will round off the day with another case study. We do actually have a spare slot here as well. So if anyone has a suggestion or you'd like to speak, please don't hesitate to get in touch. The dinner, we'll sit alongside David Nash and hear about some highlights of his amazing career that he's had. Then in the morning, Charles and Simon will kick us off with a manufacturing and certification session. So Simon's going to talk about third-party conformity assessment, and Charles will talk about the hot topics in the manufacturing community. Again, more parallel sessions. So you've got moving now to in-service inspection. So we're in the operation phase of the life cycle. So Andy will give us a talk from an inspector's viewpoint. Daniel Hill will talk about Sellafield experiences, how the nuclear sort of domain treats, in-service inspection and aging assets and so on. And Sonomatic are going to give a case study as well. Connectors on the other parallel stream. So Alex Berry, he did an excellent job the last time he presented for us, and I'm really looking forward to hearing him present this time. Scott will give us an update on the connectors guidance that was issued, and Sylvia will talk through a case study from Asset 55. And we continue through the program. You can see how much content there is in this program. It really is fantastic. So Paul Hill from team will talk about repairs and life extension. And then we've got Duncan from RENA talking about fitness for service. And Rob Johnson will talk about safety cases for life extension. On the other parallel stream in the quality side, so Peter Batty has been a friend of PSG for many, many years now, and he'll talk about global conformity assessment. Stefan is the chief executive of Emeny, coming along to present at our conference, and he's going to talk about how to. And then also Caroline Hamilton, who's the chief executive of SAFED. So we really got some big hitters in industry organising the conference around their thoughts and what's new in the life cycle. And then finally, Paul Grady will provide a regulator kind of conclusion. So we've got regulators at the beginning and the end. They kind of bookend of the the conference. So it's going to be a really fantastic 2 days. I'm certainly looking forward to it. So please go ahead and check out the program on the website there. It's got all the information you'll need. In terms of our sponsors, so we couldn't get through this presentation without mentioning our kind sponsors. So these are in alphabetical order. So Axiom, Flexitalic, LRQA and TUV have kindly agreed to sponsor. So they'll be there to interact with you, the delegates on the day. And these are our partner organisations who've helped us develop the presentations. And we'll go now then. So in summary, so this is the final slide that I have. So please don't miss out. This is the key event. If you're in any way involved in pressure systems, come along to London. It's going to be a fantastic 2 days, and it's your opportunity to interact with all the experts in the industry and shape the future. On a practical message, so you can go ahead and book on the pressure systems page of the website, the IMechE website. There is a discount if you've attended this webinar. You can just contact the events team there and quote this code, Lifecycle webinar, and you'll get a discounted rate. And yeah, and that's essentially it. So what we've hoped to do today is to talk you through an introduction to who PSG is, giving you a flavour of the hot topics that are coming around, what's around the corner. Simon and Charles have given an excellent update from their topic areas. But where that's one piece or two pieces off the jigsaw. Take a step back, think about the entire life cycle of pressure systems. And there's one event coming around the corner where you're really going to learn, where the life cycle of pressure systems and how it's important, and where your topic area kind of fits in. So what we'll do now is switch to a question and answer session. So all the questions are coming in the inbox. So please don't hesitate to send them in, and we can go through these and have a look at these. So if I come off screen share, we'll be able to have a video, I think, Molly. So if I stop screen share. So Simon and Charles can turn your cameras on, and we'll have a little face-to-face chat between the three of us. That's great, thank you. So we've got the first one here. Maybe Simon would be best placed to answer this one. So it's about preventive maintenance. So preventive maintenance and predictive maintenance are currently important topics in manufacturing. Or maybe Charles can answer it in manufacturing as well. What role do these play in the life cycle of pressure systems? So preventive and predictive maintenance.
I think at this moment in time, preventive maintenance and predictive maintenance, they haven't featured for a number of our sessions, in that there's never really been a call for it. But I do agree that most of the time, as manufacturers, if our dealings are going to be with people on site, it's usually to convince the maintenance engineers on site that our equipment is going to be sufficient and it's going to be plug and play and it's going to operate. I think realistically we could do with taking away that question and actually asking if it might be a good suggestion for the spare session that we have, and to look at how we could potentially fill that in the presentation. It's a very big subject to try and answer in one question, but when Alex would be dealing with how he does the design phase, he'll be looking at what the planned maintenance will be. Predictive maintenance is certainly an ongoing topic, but also something that's becoming incredibly important, in that people are trying to use AI to actually start taking over that prediction of when maintenance is required. So, but answering the question, what role do they play in the life cycle of pressure systems? Very important, but asking me as a manufacturer, we obviously make our equipment such that it's got minimal maintenance requirements on site, but we're really stepping away from sort of PED into PSSR and on-site activities. So probably best if we had actually somebody, not from manufacturing, but somebody from an end user perspective speaking about that. Your thoughts, Simon?
I think, as you've said, Charles, it's an important topic. It's an input, or at least what a manufacturer does is frequently an input into a preventative maintenance schedule and into planning. So if we were talking about something like the pressure equipment safety regulations in the UK, the pressure equipment directive in Europe, or any of the other codes and standards that require equipment to be certified to them, there will be some input at the end from the manufacturer of residual risks or of areas that need to be dealt with. Then, as you've quite rightly said, that moves on to the in-service requirements. So in the UK, we talk about the pressure system safety regulations, and we'd expect the manufacturer to have an appropriate maintenance schedule in place. Now, AI is something that is only really as good as the question that you ask and the data that the bot has been able to get. And I think using AI to do your predictive and planned maintenance is going to be a little bit of a challenge, unless perhaps it's a very simple and very well established piece of equipment. But it's something that I think, as you've already said, as a manufacturer, you're aware of. The in-service preventative and predictive maintenance, that is, I know you're already aware of AI and bots, but the role that it plays is probably going to be more in the in-service space and in recognizing how that's then plugged in. So we already have risk-based inspection that is carried out in service, and it could well be a topic that the output from one of the IMechE presenters could cover off.
Yeah, just to add one final thought as you were speaking, Simon, and that was that at least with the introduction of the PED and with people looking at things right in terms of risk and hazard, but also looking at maintenance, we do have the Essential Safety Requirements Questionnaire, which is probably one of the best starter documents for 10 for each design that we do, that's going to look at all the practical aspects of maintenance. So we shouldn't forget that either, that is a vital component from the design point of view.
Yeah, yeah. Where have you gone, Paul?
Not sure if he's there. Do you want us to move on to a question in his absence, Simon?
I think we may. I think that would be a good use of everybody's time. So,
Paul is back with us.
I tell you what, is he speaking now? He's frozen again. Right. So there's a question here. Will there be discussions in the upcoming conference that focus on new hydrogen production, storage, pressure systems, and if maintenance inspection requirements are different? I'll start if you like, Charles. The short answer to that is yes. Now, remember, hydrogen itself has been around for a long time, and in the design codes and in the manufacturing sphere, as well as in the inspection sphere, we would already consider hydrogen as being a gas that is potentially flammable and therefore has to be treated we have to be careful and treat it in a careful way. We'll have a couple of presenters, one of whom I think is Andy Fisher, who's going to talk about the PSSR on some large scale sites, and that will include coma sites, I'm sure. So that will include the in-service on hydrogen. And Charles, I think the design codes already cover hydrogen quite well from a design and construction point of view. It's more the way that we're now using hydrogen in a more widespread way.
Yeah, totally. You've summed it up perfectly, Simon. Thank you.
Okay, can you hear me and see me now?
Yes.
Right, sorry about that. It's a technical issue on my side. Yeah, thanks. So Andy Fisher is going to be there. He's a specialist inspector of hydrogen pressure systems, and he'll be able to answer any questions you may have on that topic. So yeah, there's a couple more questions coming in. So let's do one about capability and people's competence. So what are the best resources for a novice engineer entering the pressure systems industry to learn the basics of pressure vessel design, codes and standards? Thank you. So let's go to Charles as a manufacturer, give a view about onboarding of
me for that one.
Onboarding of new starters, and then we'll go to Simon for a note about quality and competence and perhaps certification of personnel.
I think anybody that's starting off as a novice engineer at the moment is definitely going to benefit from things that weren't previously around, such as LinkedIn pages, the videos that are being released by various companies as they perform their practices and they share their resources to learn the basics of pressure vessel design codes and standards. Realistically, I have to say an answer that may not be popular, but I think the best thing to do to start with is actually to physically get in front of the codes, to read them, to understand the intent and the ethos of what the person who has designed or written that section is trying to actually achieve, so that you can understand the basics of internal pressure, external pressure, flanges, nozzles, compartments, and then the reasons why we allocate different stresses to materials. So it would be a combination of reading the code books. It would be a combination of potentially getting onto any courses that are available. I believe Simon and David were still running courses in the University of Strathclyde, and then you obviously have LinkedIn to help, and YouTube, and then to join a really, really good forum like the Pressure Systems Group page on LinkedIn, where you will see and hear people talking about practical examples of problems, things that they've learned, but also providing updates on changes that are coming to industry. Simon?
All right, thanks, Charles. Let's go to Simon.
Right, well, the first thing I'd say is obviously an incredibly good source of knowledge and information is the 2-day Lifecycle of Pressure Systems conference and debate. But that's partly because, as Paul said, there's the opportunity to network. And as you said, Charles, we can use LinkedIn to network, but it's always more powerful to start in person. Now, then I think back to when I started out in the industry 30-something years ago. Getting in front of the codes and standards was important, but also physically looking at pressure equipment and what the impact of that design is. It's very easy to look at it on a screen as a drawing, but what does that actually mean when it's turned into a solid material, and it turns into a piece of pressure equipment that forms part of a pressure system? So that's going to interact with other pieces of equipment. And a lot of the codes and standards, they don't just talk about an item of equipment. They are intended to talk about equipment as it's joined together and forms a functional whole and actually does something. In the nuclear industry, we talk a lot about SQEP, suitably qualified and experienced personnel. And part of the way that you get qualified is obviously you do your HND or your NVQ level 4 or your degree. Then you will go and do courses with manufacturers of software, design software such as Finglo and others, or maybe you go and go to Strathclyde and do one of the courses that Simon and David do, or you can attend any one of other courses that are out there. We offer courses, many other bodies offer courses, the IMechE offer courses in specific areas, or you can go to America and do the ASME exam to demonstrate competence in understanding of the code. But the important bit then is to get some experience and to actually apply it. And that's why I mentioned what we call SQEP in the nuclear industry, because it doesn't matter how qualified you are, if you don't understand the impact of the application, you're not going to be able to produce something that works in a safe way or in a cost-effective way. So best advice is, as we've said, networking, remain curious, keep asking, and never be afraid to ask questions. because there's always someone who wants to share an answer with you. But also remember, it's a bit like Wikipedia. You can put the answer on the internet and it becomes the single source of truth. We've got to make sure that we check what the answers that they all tie together as well. So keep that questioning mindset, Paul.
Yeah, all right. Thanks very much. Yeah, some good examples of courses and practical training and so on that can help people get into pressure systems. From my side, obviously, come to pressure systems events. Get in touch with the PSG. We'll be able to help you if you're starting out your journey, in pressure systems. That's what we're here to do, to pass knowledge on to people, especially new starters in the industry. We're going to have one more quick technical question, and then I think we're going to wrap up the time. So the last one we want to do, so we've got here about materials. Charles, this is for you. You mentioned global material challenges for pressure systems. Which materials are giving the greatest challenge in sourcing? So is there anything particularly you're finding hard to get sourced?
Just obviously want to make sure it's not a misunderstanding to start with. The global material challenges that we have at this moment in time are that we can acquire and use material from Europe freely in the UK because we are CE marking or UKCA marking. When we strictly start to if we start to UKCA mark only for the UK, we are then in a position where we will be having to only work with material suppliers who have got a quality system which is certified by a UK competent body. And the problem is that most of the material suppliers in Europe are not certified by a UK competent body and may not be willing to become certified because they may not see the financial return. So the problem isn't really acquiring the materials at the moment. The problem is the challenge of what the end effects of Brexit and UKCA marking could bring for us if we suddenly decide that UKCA marking is the only way to satisfy the requirements on site. Simon, I know you'll have something to add.
Well, I thought I tried very hard not to mention the B word when I gave my presentation earlier, but we've fallen foul of it. I think materials we've had issues in the global supply chain with some, but as you've outlined, Charles, probably the largest issue that we've had in the UK of late has been the certainty of supply and whether we can continue to use materials. So people have not been stocking as much as they normally would, and that has given a resulting shortage in supply. So I think to move the materials thing forward, part of it is about making sure that there's some certainty there for people to stock and then be able to make available material. And then the second thing is to continually look at what we're sourcing and to be open to different materials to do the same job so that we've got a ready supply out there. But what we've found historically is that if the material manufacturers have got some certainty of what people want, they will obviously deliver. And certainly in the UK, once we've got over the UKCA versus CE hurdle, and equally we could say let's not bother with CE marking, let's do ASME code stamping, or let's do something else. It's not a done deal that we have to do the same thing. What we have to do is make sure we've got some certainty for everybody, and then the supply chain issues will start to unravel and solve themselves almost.
All right. Okay. Well, thanks very much, Simon and Charles, for answering those questions. Much appreciated. That's going to conclude our webinar for today. I hope you've enjoyed it. And yeah, I hope it's been a good chance for you to learn a little bit about what PSG does and hear some of the things we're going to talk about in London in October. And I hope to see as many of you as possible in IMechE HQ at the end of October. So please get in touch if you have any queries, any questions. Please go on to LinkedIn if you want to have a technical discussion. And so I'll say thanks again to the presenters and to IMechE for organising, and thank you to you all for joining and listening. And that concludes our webinar. Thanks.